Hello there, and welcome to another Friday night for another edition of Not Your Average Globetrotter. I'm Rafael de Furia, back at it again to talk more about life abroad, living abroad as a dual expat citizen. And this week, I wanted to briefly talk about some of the things that I've been missing about Italy. Having some time away has given me some time to think about some of the things that I do appreciate about life in Italy, but maybe some of the things that I've come to appreciate more about living in Italy now that I'm no longer living there and living in Portugal. But just before we get into this episode, a huge thank you to those of you who help to make these episodes possible through rafaeldefuria.com/support/NYAG gear, and especially to those of you who help to make these episodes possible through Patreon on a monthly basis. Truly thank you also very much for helping this project to be able to continue. But of course, it is time to get started, so roll that intro. Just a quick comment question of the week for the comment section here on YouTube. If you have lived abroad, what are some of the things that you miss about your home country or one of the countries that you've lived in? But if you haven't lived abroad, what are some of the things that you think you might miss about home? I mean, of course, there's family, but what else do you think you might miss after leaving your home country? It's kind of funny how in life, how we seek out things that are familiar to us. After leaving America, there were certain things that I was kind of always reaching for, foods or feelings or certain things that I had experienced that emotionally pulled at me, that were difficult after having left. But after having left Italy, also having moved around more and having been in different countries, that this move was maybe emotionally one of the easiest ones, but I do find myself looking and reaching for those things that are familiar. And it's kind of funny because when I was in Italy, of course, like you move to Italy, you think, oh, I'm going to start eating Italian food and eating the correct way and this and that. But for me growing up, Italian food was kind of what was had at home. I mean, granted, also, we ate a lot of other things, a lot of different types of cuisines. But even I remember once going to an Italian restaurant as a kid, and I've mentioned this in a past episode. I was there with family, and I said to my mother, I think I want to get spaghetti. She's like, what? Why are you getting spaghetti? Spaghetti with tomato sauce. And she just was like, if you're going to have that, just eat that at home. We're out. Get something else. Get something different. Get something special. And so I ended up getting something else. I don't remember what it was that night, but it was just kind of, it set this thing in my head. Oh, wait, if I'm going to go out, why am I going to go eat at an Italian restaurant if I could eat the same thing at home? But then after moving to Italy, it was kind of like a strange thing for me. Okay, finally, I'm in Italy. I'm going to have all this Italian food. But I ended up not always going to Italian restaurants. Okay, fine, you can't always go to the same thing. But most of the restaurants around me were Italian. And there would be a lot of things that I would maybe make at home. But if I go to an Italian restaurant, maybe it would be something that I wouldn't normally do myself. Like, for example, carpaccio. One of my favorite things where I lived in Rovigo, it wasn't exactly the easiest to find carpaccio, but you could get tartare everywhere. So I would get steak tartare if I would go out and if it were available. But now here, after leaving Italy, I kind of find myself looking for more of an Italian experience and like, fine, okay, I can do things at home. But if I'm going out, maybe something special is in fact going to an Italian place. And there's an Italian place locally that I found that actually does some pretty good pizza. It's kind of funny because it's like right in between an Italian style pizza and an American style pizza. Like it's an Italian style pizza, but with enough cheese. I hate to put it that way, but there were so many times I had pizza that I just never felt like there was enough cheese on it. Like if I could see tomato sauce and it was just a few like globs of mozzarella, that was just never enough for me. And so here I can get like the Neapolitan, almost Neapolitan-esque style crust, but with a little bit more firmness to it. And then enough cheese. And so I seek out those kind of experiences. Yes, I have posted on my Instagram stories about like Pizza Hut and those things that I haven't had in years. And yes, they were exciting, but they're like two different types of foods almost in a way. Yes, they're both under the umbrella of pizza, but Italian pizza is one thing. American pizza is another thing. American pizza in Portugal is kind of another thing. Not quite American pizza, but it's in that direction of something more familiar. And so I also like going to this Italian place because there's somebody who works there that speaks Italian. The reason why I found that out was because I accidentally started speaking in Italian after reading the menu, because all the names of the dishes were in Italian. But I have this problem with languages. I'm not good at translating. I can get by with some languages and I can understand. Sometimes someone can tell me a word. I understand it perfectly. But if you ask me to translate it on the spot, I'm going to be, like, I won't be able to do it. But if I'm speaking one language, especially if it's a Latin language, and I read another Latin language or I hear another Latin language, even if it's only briefly, my brain switches gears and then I can only start really speaking in that other language. So this happened to me at this Italian place that I was reading the menu in Italian. There was Portuguese under the Italian and also English under that, but I was focused on the Italian. And so when the waiter came over, I just started speaking in Italian. I didn't realize it. The waiter looked at me funny. He said, "I'll be back in a minute." The person that I was with was like, "Why are you speaking Italian?" I was like, "What do you mean I was speaking Italian?" They said, "No, you were speaking Italian." Then somebody else came over and they started speaking to me in Italian. I was like, "Why are they speaking to me in Italian?" Whatever. So now for me, it's kind of nice because it's got almost an Italian feeling when you go there, like this Italian vibe. And it's a place that I can kind of practice a little bit and continue with my Italian learning because that's something I would very much like to do. And so like sometimes when you're living abroad, you seek out those things that are familiar and people that are familiar or at least culturally familiar. And so I've kind of been looking for those connections, it just kind of naturally. I mean, I have said in many episodes about wanting to be away from an expat community, but I am at a point in my life now where I see there's a balance that needs to be had. You can't just escape the expat community and get away from it completely and then you can't be just fully in it. It's nice to have a balance of something that's familiar with something that's new. And if you're living in just the expat community, you're not getting the full experience of the place by any means. Since being here in Portugal, I have met people who are born and raised in Italy. I've met a couple Italian Americans as well, but it's nice to have that familiarity. And even the interactions that I've had with Italians here, it's kind of like, "Oh, wait, why do you speak in Italy? Oh, I used to live in Italy, but why?" And you're getting, "Oh, where are you from? Where's this and that and the other? Oh, that's so cool. And your family's from here and you went to Italy. Wow, that's fantastic." Like that kind of stuff. And that actually has happened to me more here than it did even in Italy. It's kind of surprising in a way, but there's a little bit more of that connection outside of Italy than even inside. Because also for me, Italy is kind of what I think of as home in a way. Yes, I'm from the States, but I left there a long time ago. My home for a while has been Italy, and it was always my goal to get there anyway. So in the back of my mind, like there was always that Italy thing. But even now, having lived there for 5 years, like it's very much a part of me. But then there's other things that have really kind of stuck. I mean, in videos, some of you guys have noticed and even commented on my gesticulation, but I've always gesticulated like my whole life. Maybe when I was in Italy, it got a little bit more. But then also when we're talking about Italy and gesticulation, it's part of the language in a way. It's almost like another layer to the language because you have a spoken language and then you have the physical side of the language and you get another side. I mean, there are certain gesticulations that actually mean like certain things that they just will add a different layer to the conversation. And I apologize for what I may have just gesticulated, but that's just some examples of certain things that you can find in a conversation that will add. And maybe what I'm gesticulating now has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But when you're having a conversation in Italy, you do find many times that there are multiple levels to that conversation. The person can be verbally saying one thing, but giving you more context with what gesticulations they're actually using. There's like a formal, almost non-formal language in there. And that was something in Italy with how non-perfect my Italian was that made it easier for me to be able to communicate with people. Because gesticulation is something that I grew up with, and gesticulation is something that is very much a part of the Italian culture and communication style. But here in Portugal, there's some gesticulation, but there's not as much used. In Italy, for example, you have like a form to the gesticulation and actual meanings to these gestures and meanings, like set meanings for some of these gestures. In Portugal, there have been times when I found myself reaching for some of gesticulation and for a situation where I'm trying to explain something to the other person because my Portuguese is lacking, but they're not understanding what I'm saying with the words that I'm trying to use in my hands. I don't know how much sense that will make, but that's actually made communication here in Portugal more difficult for me because of that lack of ability to use motions to try to express what it is that I'm trying to get across. So I would say that that's a cultural aspect of Italy that I really do miss quite a bit, actually. But then there's kind of getting back to the food thing, gelato. I mean, in Portugal, you have something called gelado. But what you might even see here being called gelato or like Italian gelato is not the same. And this is, I think, a problem with Latin-based languages, even in Spanish, gelado, and even Italian has this issue that there's not a specification for the difference between ice cream and gelato. Maybe in Italian, gelato artigianale, like artisanal gelato, but there's an expectation in my mind. If I say gelato, I'm talking about a creamy, cold dessert that has a high fat content made with just about no water in it, whereas ice cream can actually have water in it. So there are times I've even gone out to get what I was hoping for, a gelato, but I got something that I would call ice cream instead. And then on top, the flavors are completely just different. Here, even in Portugal, they're almost too sweet for me sometimes. Like I've gotten very used to the Italian style of maybe some of the subdued flavors and not like overly sugary sweet. In Portugal, I've had a mix between some overly sugary sweet and some pretty darn sweet. But I have yet to find what I would call the Italian gelato. And I really do miss that, especially my favorite flavor, cookies. If you know, you know. Cookies is my favorite of all time. And yes, in Italy, if you've never been, this particular flavor is called cookies, not biscotti. It's called cookies. Some places, if they're doing a copy of it and they haven't, I guess, paid for the rights to use the cookies name, they'll call it biscotti. But again, kind of getting into this idea of there are things around you or foods, flavors, or smells that can bring you back to that sense of home or hominess. Because the sense of home can be a different thing. And even though I do think of Italy as home in many ways, I can't say that I necessarily have that sense of home in a specific place, if that makes sense. Maybe Rovigo. But when we're talking about maybe some of the things that are familiar from home, I know one thing that Americans will always complain about after moving abroad, like one of the first things, where are the Ziploc bags? I can't find Ziploc bags anywhere. And for me, Ziploc bags, whatever. But maybe this is a little strange to talk about on YouTube, but there is a particular brand of Italian toilet paper that I just can't find here in Portugal. It is like the top best toilet paper you will ever find in your life. It's called Foxy Cotton. And it is a step above the rest. One sheet is like, it's really good. That's all I'm going to say is it takes care of what it needs to take care of. But in Portugal, I have yet to be able to find a toilet paper that I would say could compare. Not even close. And I will admit, I have tried a number of different ones since arriving here. The connoisseur of the toilet paper. But no, really, it's gotten to the point where I have started looking into, can I order this kind of toilet paper online from Italy, or is there someone who happens to be a supplier that might have some here in Portugal or even over next door in Spain? Is there any way that I can get that here? Because I'm going to say it's worth it. It's that good. Again, very strange thing to be talking about in a public forum like this, but I do find that there are little things that I've gotten very used to that I do seek out. Another thing, though, that really creates the ambiance that really felt like Italy to me. When I was living in Rovigo, they had the music academy, not academies, conservatories. And you would hear opera walking through the streets. And I don't hear opera here. I miss hearing opera being sung in the streets. It's just, even though I'm not an avid opera listener, I do enjoy hearing some of it from time to time, especially in Italian. There are operas in other languages, and it's just opera is supposed to be Italian. Let's just cross that off right now. Let's not get it confused. Opera, Italian, end of story. Maybe there's some good ones in German, but that's whatever. Italian. But here in Braga, I haven't heard opera in the streets, but it does seem as though there actually are a lot of students who play music here through the university. And so there are some places where I have walked by in the city that I do hear music being played. And so that for me is great. I love music. It must shock you with this kind of background that I must love music, but it's great. It gives this nice, fun feeling in the air. And also, I mean, even walking around here in Braga, you see a lot of students walking around with music cases. But does missing a place mean that you have to go back? No, that doesn't mean you have to. I don't regret the move that I made. Of course, like I said in the video, it was episode 220. If you have any questions and are not clear why I left, I definitely recommend going to check that out. You can check that out up in the corner of the video right here. Hopefully it should be the side of the video. But family comes first, like I said. That's the reason why I'm here. And I'm glad that I actually had that reason to be here, because it's allowed me to come and explore and enjoy a whole new place, a whole new part of the world. I mean, granted, Portugal is not necessarily new to me, but this part of Portugal is. And I really do love it here. I love Italy and I love Portugal. And it's not like you can only have this exclusivity only for that one. Maybe when it comes to a personal relationship, a romantic relationship in that way, yeah, okay, exclusivity, I'll agree with that. And I'm very much on board in that regard. But you can have strong feelings about more than one thing. Because I have this love for Portugal doesn't mean that my feelings for Italy are any less. It's a different, it's like a separate thing. I guess parents must go through something like this, that you love all of your children in a different way. At least I would hope that you would, and that it's not that you love one child more or less. It's just you love them in the way that you love them because of who they are and what they are to you. Like I would imagine the love that you have for your first child is not the same that you have for maybe your third child, but it's not that it's more and it's not that it's less. It's just that there's a different experience attached to each one of them. Unless your third child is just a little stinker, and then in that case, it's understandable. But jokes aside, I do miss Italy and I do love it there, but thankfully it's not that far away. And when I do have to go, I will be able to go there. Of course, with the current situation and everything, travel for me is something that I prefer not to do. And that's why I've been doing so many of these indoor episodes. And so, no, I don't have that same feeling like I had when I was there. It's always going to be a part of me. It's always going to be something inside of me, that experience that I had there, all the trips that I took when I was younger, and then living there. Like, these are all just part of me and who I've become. I can't help that. Just like my experience in other countries and in the US. And these have all come to shape who I am and the way that I see things in the world. And so this is something that I see in my home as an adult, and living with the ability to create the space that I live in the way that I like it. I include things from different parts of the world, things that I picked up, things that I like to eat, or whatever it may be, that I will have even in my kitchen. I mean, even, for example, I don't drink soda a lot, but I've come to find here that there is this one soda from the Middle East that I had that I absolutely loved, and it's probably my favorite soda of all time. And I haven't been able to find it most of the places that I've lived, but here in Braga, they happen to have it. And so, yeah, I've kept a couple of them in my fridge because it's something that I enjoy. Or like, there are certain cookies that I like that are Italian. And so I found those at the supermarket. There are certain sauces that I found that are Italian. And so I keep those in my kitchen. Or there are certain flavors from Portugal that I also like. Piri piri, for example. I also keep that in my kitchen because I have all of these things that I miss, but I thankfully am able to figure out a way to incorporate in my life, even though maybe I can't be in some of these places, that I can still make it part of my daily reality. But it's not just things or places or feelings that I miss, but it's also people there that help to create the experiences that I had. I have friends that are still there, people that I do miss, that I miss not being able to get together with, being able to go grab a bite with, or saying, hey, what's up? You want to just go downtown, grab a coffee like last second? Like, fine, I have friends here as well, but it's a different experience because every individual you have a different relationship with. But even the experience of going out with friends is, I would say, in some ways, there are some similarities being in Southern Europe. Even though Portugal is not on the Mediterranean, there are certain aspects that are similar to Italy when it comes to socializing. And so, I mean, like you go to a restaurant, but like here in Braga specifically, there's not like a piazza in the same way that you have like in like some cities in Italy, like even small little Rovigo. But you do have the big square here in the center of Braga, and there's a park that's attached to it. So you will find people hanging out at the park, sitting on the grass, sitting on the benches. And I mean, even here's my little thing that I do miss about America, burgers. I've mentioned that in numerous episodes. So like, this is the great thing, that if I do feel like I need that fix, I can get that here. Unfortunately, that fix sometimes comes in the form of McDonald's, but hey, a McDonald's cheeseburger, there's just something about it, something about the way that they do it. And I kind of like I don't know how, I've actually been to McDonald's way more outside of America than I ever went in America. Maybe less than a handful of times. Like I wouldn't even use all the fingers on my hand probably for the times that I went in America. But the experience of going to a McDonald's here, I mean, you go up to a screen and you tap what you want, but in Portugal specifically, they have an app that's really cool, in my opinion, that you can make your order and just pick up the order and you're ready. Or you can even, I think you can even eat there and order from the app, pay for it and everything, so that you don't have to wait in line. It's just, it happens. You get your number for your order and that's it. I enjoy it from time to time. I'll admit that. And I know there are plenty of expats that say, oh, how could you? You would eat at McDonald's living abroad? After 13 years, come back and talk to me again. That's all I'm going to say. Because, I mean, look, there are sometimes those moments where you need something that's familiar that you can just think quick and like, all right, I know I can go grab that. And this was actually something in Italy that I will say that I don't necessarily miss. There are aspects that I liked about it, but the slow food culture or taking time for things to be made. I do like that. And if I have time, I do like my food to be made and prepared fresh. But I also still have a little bit of that Americanness inside of me and who I am. And there are times that I would like to eat and walk at the same time. And eating and walking in Italy is not really a thing. From what it seemed like, it was really a faux pas. And here in Portugal, actually, funny enough, I've seen plenty of people doing it here. As a single guy who works a lot, yeah, it's nice to have some conveniences. Conveniences are convenient. Shocking. Anyway, I think this is where I'm going to end off this episode. So thank you all so very much for joining me for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Of course, a huge, huge thank you to those of you who helped to make these episodes possible through Patreon, the shirts, mugs, onesies, and more, as well as the one-time donations. Thank you also very much. Of course, all of the links are down below in the more info section here on YouTube. Of course, as always, I hope that you stay safe and healthy out there, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Of course, don't forget this week's comment question of the week here on YouTube. If you're listening to this as an audio-only podcast, feel free to come on over to YouTube. And of course, I will see you all next week. Have a great one. Later.